anything better than seeing a great athlete just about still at their peak. And I'm talking about Novak Djokovic here. Oh, John Duran, by the way, he lasted back 6 months out in the UAE. I don't know whether you saw that. You might remember me slating him when he moved out there. And how he finds himself on loan to Fenerbahce, I believe.
He'd pick good wine, good food, and he'd have some great stories about the greatest clubs in the world.
Hello, welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 50. We finally made it. Myself, David, and Mr. Oliver Wilson on the pod this week. I want to talk Wimbledon, Ollie, and I want to talk about how Jack Draper is a bottler, and I've always said that. Let's talk about the Club World Cup and the semi-finals, because you've got Fluminense against Chelsea. Could Fluminense actually get to the final? Paris Saint-Germain against Real Madrid in the other semi. Let's talk F1 and Silverstone, Ollie. I listened to this on the radio, and I want to dig into this, mate, because that sport, for an outside observer, is simply too confusing, in my opinion. Lots of other Wimbledon stuff and other bits of sport in between. But first of all, Ollie, as I was just saying to you off pod, mate, this coming Saturday, I am playing golf for the first time in what must be 15 years. I reckon last time I was on a driving range was 15 years ago. And I know, and you know, and our listeners know that Ollie Wilson is, he's Mr. Golf. So what, if you give me 3 bits of advice, having not played golf in 15 years, what would you say? I've got decent hand-eye, by the way.
Yeah, rotate hips, because otherwise you'll be too steep. If you're all arms, you'll be too steep and you'll slice. So you need to rotate round, not just the top of the body, but the hips. Get the hips releasing early on the way down, so the hips then bring the rest of the body round. And keep your head looking at the ball even after you've hit it, because that way you'll make sure that you look at the ball rather than looking up to see where it's gone as you swing, and that will get you moving away and will keep your hopefully the body from slicing it too much.
And what am I allowed to wear, mate? But it's just Chiswick Golf Club, I think. So presumably quite like a nice Southwest London golf club. What can I get away with these days? Obviously, I don't have any golf kit.
Yeah, you need a polo shirt with a collar for sure. You need either
smart shorts, fine.
Yeah, smart shorts. No kind of camo shorts or baggy cargo shorts or anything.
Don't
like
own that kind of stuff. No,
I know you're not a man that'll own it, but the way you said that was like a level. I don't own that. Like, ugh. What do you take me for? I was in the queue at Wimbledon the other day and we were popping champagne. It was great banter.
Go on, keep going. What else? What in terms of shoes?
Can't wear trainers. You should have some golf shoes of some sort. Like.
So I can't wear Sambas?
I don't think you'd be able to get away with it, unfortunately.
And you can't wear any trainers, like running trainers?
No,
like
not
that.
Running trainers or anything, no. But a cheap pair of golf shoes.
Golf shoes incoming.
Cheap pair of golf shoes. Travis Massey's got a sale on. There's a nice pair for £20 you can pick up in the sale. So, yeah.
And can you rent stuff at a golf club? Because my mate who's organising it all, he said, don't worry, you can rent clubs, but you've got to bring your own bag. But obviously, I don't have a golf bag, so how does that work?
That's
Is that normal in golf clubs?
Yeah, if you rent clubs, they tend to provide a bag for you as well.
Surely.
But yeah, I'd ring up the club and check with that one, because you don't want to turn up and be the guy carrying like 14 clubs like that in your arms.
It's a par 3 course, mate.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So what's that, like an 8-iron and a putter?
If that, pitching wedge, 9-iron at most. Yeah, and a putter. Yeah, you probably only need like 3 or 4 clubs. But they might be funny about you have to have a bag if it's nice. So
we'll see, and I'll report back next Monday, Ollie.
Yeah, I'm interested to know what your score is, and if it gives you a new appreciation for, or if you have one of those moments where you hit one good shot and you're like, that feeling of hitting a really good one is enough to make you want to come back. Like, I get it, kind of thing. It'd be interesting to see.
Ollie, let's start the pod with a different kind of tone, because I do want to talk about the death of Diogo Jota, aged 28, in a car accident last week. Look, so many people have articulated this far better than I'm about to on this pod, very, very briefly. I think the level of shock and grief over the past week that his wife and family must have experienced is completely incomprehensible. And I use that word really deliberately, Ollie, because many of us will experience tragedy in our lives, right? That is part of life. But that kind of incomprehensible shock in a single moment is something that is just is absolutely impossible to fathom how his family and his wife and those related to him must feel. I think that it's just so desperately tragic, and you look for takeaways from this kind of thing, and it's very hard to find some. But I think the kind of the roulette wheel of life is just impossibly brutal sometimes, and you can't. There's no rhyme or reason for some stuff. It's just brutally tragic, and it is what it is. And I think sometimes as well, when an athlete dies, Ollie, in their prime, the reason it's so shocking to outside observers is just that you see pro athletes, and they're this epitome of vitality and life. And so it becomes more jarring, I think, and harder to understand how they've just gone. Ollie and I were talking on WhatsApp this weekend, actually, and I was just saying, I think in my lifetime, he's probably he's the highest profile athlete to die in his prime. Obviously, other footballers, I think it's about Jose Antonio Reyes and David Story and Cheick Tiote and plenty others. And just talking about athletes that are part of a global sport, and Diego Jota was up front for one of the world's biggest clubs in the world's biggest sport. And apart from Ayrton Senna, who died in the 94, early 90s, I think Diego Jota has got to be one of the most high profile, and that's why it had such a ripple effect, I think, around the world. So, yeah, shocking and tragic, Ollie, and I don't know, man. There's just, what can you say to something like that? It's hard to comprehend.
Oh, it's incredibly sad. It's a great footballer taken way before he should be, and all you can do is put thoughts out to his family and friends and those that are directly affected by it, and hope that they can get through what is a horrible time for them right now. And just whether it's you want to go to the cliche thoughts and prayers, or whether it is just kind of sending out some positivity to them, it's very sad. Nothing more really to say on it, I think.
No, and it's also just bad, mate, how after tragedy, life and football, as it has to, does just kind of plod on. Like it feels weird, but it does just go on, and the new season will start, and there'll be tributes and games will be played and trophies will be won, and Jota won't be forgotten. But after every tragedy in football or not, it's just life just sort of goes on. It's weird, and you almost feel, those sort of closest to him probably feel a bit guilty about that at times, I think. But it is. What can you say? Yeah,
I'm waiting for you to use the "as will this podcast" to get out of this moment.
Not on sports, but will come rain or shine. We'll keep going. Let's talk football first of all, Ollie. Let's talk the Club World Cup. Is there a possibility? We're down to the semi-finals now of the Club World Cup. We've got Fluminense against Chelsea. And we've got Paris Saint-Germain against Real Madrid. Now, Fluminense on the podcast last week, I said had absolutely no chance of reaching the semi-finals of the competition. And yet, here we are, such is the randomness of sport. Chelsea are a decent side, Ollie. They're not a great side. And this Fluminense side has a togetherness off the back, really, of 18 months ago winning the Libertadores. This has changed a little bit, but a lot of the spine, a lot of the ideas in that Fluminense side are the same. So we're at a point now, Ollie, where Fluminense could reach the final of the Club World Cup. Is it possible? Will it happen? Can it happen?
I mean, everything is possible in football. I mean, if you want to look at the bare bones, even of the quarterfinals, you'd look at Chelsea and say it wasn't the most accomplished performance. They got through on a Everton own goal. Palmeiras' winger ended up turning into his own net, and that's how Chelsea got the match-winning goal late on to secure a 2-1 victory against the Brazilians. But then you'd look at Fluminense, who probably had arguably the easiest draw for the quarterfinals against Al Hilal, and they only squeaked over the line with a 2-1 victory themselves. So it's tournament football in that anything can happen. I think this is a Chelsea side that will be astonishingly tired at this point. I think this is a Fluminense side that probably of every side left in this competition have the most to gain and the least to lose, which makes them a very dangerous prospect indeed, because as we've touched on so many times, the South American sides relish and love the idea of being able to compete and topple the supposed big European giants. And let's face it, in this FIFA Club World Cup right now, in the draw remaining, how much would Fluminense love to not only reach the final, but topple one of the biggest English sides on the planet? Maybe not the biggest at the moment, for sure. And this isn't the greatest Chelsea side. It's not the best Chelsea team that we've seen over the last 10 years, even 5 years, for sure. you've got the reigning champions of Europe in Paris Saint-Germain, and you've got the kings of Europe in Real Madrid. I mean, if Fluminense won this, you can rewrite the annals, the history books of South American football as arguably one of the most unlikely and yet unbelievable victories of any South American side against the European continent. Whether it's actually going to happen, it's ifs and buts. As I say, though, the fatigue of Chelsea, I think, will have to come into it. And I can only see Fluminense coming out with this, it doesn't matter at this point for us. We're in this Final Four with the last South American side left in it. We've got the bragging rights on our continent. We've got the bragging rights of every single side in this competition that's outside of the European continent. And there's no humiliation at all in falling to any one of these sides at any point in the remainder. That makes them a dangerous proposition.
And yet the upside, Ollie, is huge. If Fluminense could get to the final, if somehow Fluminense could win this tournament, the spotlight on Brazilian football, when you look at the entirety of the competition, when you look at the fact that Botafogo beat Paris Saint-Germain, if Fluminense could get to the final or even go on and win it, I think it would shine a very positive light on Brazilian football. Ollie's shaking his head there, but the fact is, these are big football clubs. It is a huge nation. It's the nation that's won the World Cup the most amount of times. We've talked about this on the podcast before. The fact that Brazilian football is not highlighted and not broadcast outside Brazil is just absolutely crazy. And I do think Fluminense... I personally think this Club World Cup is bigger than maybe Ollie thinks it is, because I think if Fluminense were to go to the final, it would be a big deal.
I don't think Fluminense going to the final or winning this has a direct impact or change on how European football fans, probably North American football fans to a large extent, who probably hold South American football in a higher credibility than I would say that we do in general in Europe. I don't think it changes many perceptions at all. What it does, it makes it perfect for FIFA if Fluminense win this. I'm not getting the tin hat on or anything like that and saying the fix is in or anything. But if a Brazilian side in particular win this, I think it's a harder one for FIFA if, say, a Boca or a Riverside win this. There's still a slightly damaged profile of moving the Libertadores final all the way across the globe to Madrid not too long ago, of course, and the reasons for that being the case. And I don't think Argentina has that same, aside from obviously Messi and Maradona, globally beloved feel. Like, the Brazilian football team must be the most loved international football team outside of its own country across the globe.
I agree with that, Ollie, but that reputation's waning. They haven't won a World Cup since 2002, right? Mm-hmm. And we were pretty young then in 2002. So that reputation is waning, and it's going to be very interesting in the 2026 World Cup to see what Ancelotti can do. They've got that big brand name of a manager and a great coach. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
But the Brazil national team is a brand, and Brazilian football to some extent is a brand. And there are still people that know of the great Nike advert with the Brazil side running through the airport who weren't even born then.
Advertising arguably peaked at that moment.
So for a Brazilian side to win this, it gives FIFA the opportunity to say, look, South American football is just as big as European football. It gives FIFA an opportunity to say, look at Brazil, it's still the home of arguably some of the greatest footballers on the planet. Because that's the beautiful thing about this Fluminense side. Look, they've got people like Jefferson, Uteldo, Gabriel Fuentes, etc. But the majority, 99% of that side is Brazilian. And it's a great thing to see, as one of the things I do like about South American football is a lot of the time when you watch these sides, the majority of the players are from the nations that the side is playing in. It shows that there's an attempt, or at least they are developing and maintaining high levels of football within their own country. So it works for everybody in that cynical marketing sense. It's very difficult.
Got to talk about Fabio as well.
It's very, very difficult to look past Chelsea. It really is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think just on Fluminense fine. Fabio 44, Ollie 7 games shy of Shilton's record. Almost a shame that he's not sort of in line to potentially break it during this tournament, because. But it is a narrative we'll certainly follow if and when he does break that Shilton record. The other semi-final, Paris Saint-Germain against Real Madrid, Ollie. I've actually watched a couple of Real Madrid games in the Club World Cup this year, and there's no doubt Xabi Alonso is building something. And I think he's lucky in some ways, Xabi Alonso. Because Club World Cup for Real Madrid is obviously not a free hit. They're Real Madrid. They've won it 5 times. They'll be expected to win it this year. But it's a free hit just in the sense that for Xabi Alonso, he gets this pre-season, albeit on an elevated level of intensity and prestige and eyeballs. But it gives Xabi Alonso the chance to have a look at this squad. And for anyone that hasn't watched the Club World Cup so far this tournament, there's plenty of narratives, but one big narrative that will come out for it that will go into next season and the coming seasons is Real Madrid have got a striker called Gonzalo Garcia, joint top scorer in the tournament, 21 years of age. Everyone's calling him the next Raul. And Xabi Alonso's made quite a big call, Ollie, in the sense that in this 3-5-2 system that Xabi Alonso has, the obvious play would be to play Vinicius Jr. and Kylian Mbappe, right, as the top two. And because Gonzalo Garcia has been scoring goals, joint top scorer in the tournament, he's played Vinicius Jr. and Gonzalo Garcia. And then in their last game against Dortmund, he took off, I think, Vinny Jr. and then brought on Mbappe. So, yes, Mbappe's coming back from injury, but there's a sense, I think, that he's got three strikers for two positions, and a lesser coach with less of a status than Xabi Alonso would have just played Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. But because Gonzalo Garcia is this, he's the one scoring goals, I think Xabi Alonso is going to play him. I watched a lot of, I watched Real Madrid the last couple of games. Look, Trent on that right wing-back position doesn't really have to defend because Antonio Rudiger's going to do all the dirty work for him. Looks good. Fran Garcia, left-hand side, quality. So there's Thibaut Courtois, if not the best goalkeeper in the world, then top 2 or 3 alongside maybe Alisson Becker. So, yeah, it's interesting to watch Real Madrid. And that Paris Saint-Germain Real Madrid semi-final on Wednesday night, probably if you're going to watch one game this whole tournament, that'd probably be it.
Yeah, I think that's it's mouth-watering. The odds are in PSG's favour, I think, just in form. And obviously, as you touched on, Xabi Alonso he's getting his feet under the table. I do think, as you mentioned as well there, it is the perfect way to get your feet under the table. You see it. It's very interesting. In American football, they'll have a pre-season and then teams will go off to another team and have a training scrimmage because you can't do everything you want watching your own team hit and train against each other. People get to know things. People get to see things. You want to see it against somebody else. And if anything really positive comes out of the Club World Cup for Xabi Alonso in terms of being thrown into this Real Madrid job in this way, it's having this opportunity to tinker at a competitive level over this summer. I actually think that's a big benefit for any manager coming in because these players know they have to still try and work their way into Xabi Alonso's thoughts. And he's made that obviously very clear with what he's done with Mbappe and rotating players and happy to go with the young kid up top and Garcia. And he gets to see the reaction of his team in a tournament position. He gets them away as well. And everybody knows that, like, the training camps where you go away, I know it doesn't work quite sometimes for England and France at these big major tournaments, etc. But you see it in so many sports when they say, when something new comes in or when something big comes in or there's a big reshuffle or whatever, and we get these moments where we go away for a few weeks and it's just us, the wives and girlfriends a bit, and we've got training and it's all about the sport and the team, that's when the camaraderie starts to build. Xabi Alonso's kind of got that in this competition in terms of being away in the United States with this club, tinkering, working, gelling with them in a very unique and intense environment that will only come around every 4 years. It's actually a really good opportunity. And some people may have thought this would make it tougher for Xabi Alonso. I think it makes it easier.
I think you make a really sharp point, Ollie, about the fact they're away from Madrid because the crowd at the Bernabeu, renowned of they can get on the backs of players very, very quickly, no mercy, that kind of thing. And Trent Alexander-Arnold last 2 games, he's given the ball away loads, Ollie, loads. And I just wonder if that had happened at home at the Bernabeu, like quite what the reaction would have been. But he's not. He's away from those prying eyes, and he pops up with a couple of assists last 2 games. Same with Xabi Alonso, what he's done with this Vinicius Jr. and Mbappe and Garcia. 3 players have got to somehow fit into 2 positions. I think if that was at the Bernabeu, I don't know if there's there's something else in the air that Xabi Alonso has to think about, but he's away from that. This is in Jersey, isn't it? I think the quarterfinal and the semi-finals, and the final played in the MetLife Stadium, right, in Jersey. So it's away from that kind of goldfish bowl of Madrid, and I think that's definitely helped Xabi Alonso.
Yeah, it's not it's not as big as a downfall potentially this tournament for some of these European sides. Just got to worry about the stress. That's all. Travel, a lot of travel around the United States for these clubs, lot of games, and at least Xabi Alonso, going with that rotation as well. Like, fine, yeah, give Mbappe a game off, half a game off. Give Vinicius a game off, half a game off. Let the young kid who's trying to prove himself run himself around a bit. When it gets to key moments in 8 months' time in a Champions League semi-final, Champions League final, It's still going to be Vinicius Junior and Mbappe that Real Madrid will be looking and leaning towards at certain points in those big end of season moments. Can't have them going into the start of a new season being too tired and starting to drain already. Not a problem with the squad depth this Madrid team has.
Before we move on to Wimbledon and F1, Ollie, one other football story that caught my eye this week, you may or may not have seen this, but did you see that Davide Ancelotti is now the Botafogo manager? I don't know whether you saw this. And I love the fact that, so this is the son of Carlo Ancelotti, who was Carlo Ancelotti's like number 2, or certainly part of his senior coaching setup at Real Madrid. And Carlo Ancelotti's obviously taken the Brazil job, so he'll be based in Rio. And Davide Ancelotti has now taken the Botafogo head coach role. And Botafogo's a Rio-based club. So I love the Italian keeping it in the family, Ollie. But what an interesting move for Davide Ancelotti. I mean, probably could have taken a job down the bottom of Serie A or La Liga or maybe in the Championship. So, yeah, an interesting one for Davide Ancelotti to take the Botafogo job.
Yeah, it's, well, I mean, the Ancelotti name is getting heavily embedded in Brazilian football, isn't it? I mean, you want to talk about brand and marketing. The Ancelottis can start opening up some Italian restaurants around Sao Paulo with the fresh fish that you can catch there and such. I mean, it'd be great. And we all know that Big Carlo loves his food if anybody's read his book. So, I mean, yeah. I
haven't read his book, Ollie, but you've referenced it a few times on this podcast. So just go into this slightly. So is there a huge... He loves his food, but how does that come across in the book?
Yeah, because he talks about that for like the first 3 chapters. You know, he says that like the dinner times with the players is his favourite time. He's always going on about, if anybody knows me, I love like, you know, nice pork cutlets or like good Italian meatballs and stuff. And he yeah, I think it's like the first 4 chapters. There's about 8 or 9 references to various meals. And he openly says, like, the thing I love as much or more than football, basically, is food. And it's like, yeah, that's... And I like that because you could be one of these, like, managerial psychopaths, right? That's just locked in.
Which is most of them.
Yeah, locked in all the time, analysing data, analysing the training ground videos, etc. And Ancelotti, in the book, just comes across as, like, a pretty normal guy. Like, if I could speak Italian and wanted to have a sit-down, like, dinner with any football manager, it would be Carlo, I think. He'd pick good wine, good food, and he'd have some great stories about the greatest clubs in the world.
Would that be your ideal sit-down with any living sports star, Ollie?
Ooh. Just a one-on-one?
Yeah, surely you'd go for a golfer.
Yeah, but... golfers, as we've seen, are sometimes a little boring.
A bit robotic.
It's the same as, like, I mean, I've not met many triathletes, but a couple of the people that I've worked with have said, like, triathletes are lovely people, but, you know, they're so focused on the training and stuff. That,
like Olympians, right?
Yeah, it's all about that. Whereas I think footballers and managers of, like, the 90s, early 2000s are in that level of, like, real professionalism combined with pre-data analytics and mobile phones and social media and stuff. And that's why there's a lot of like juicy stories and exciting moments from their careers and stuff that you could get into. Carlo would definitely be up there. I'd have to ponder properly who would be the ultimate one though. What about you?
I'd have to give it some thought, I think, Ollie. But I agree with you on your thesis that you wouldn't want to waste an hour and a half in that moment with someone who you felt would give quite robotic, guarded, media-trained answers. You'd want someone who was loose and you could have a real conversation with.
So I could imagine Carlo being a bit like our old boss back in Argentina. And that's the kind of person that I could sit down at any point for an hour and a half and have
good shout,
a coffee or a conversation with. That's what you're looking for.
Really good shout.
I mean, it's
instantly likable. Everyone wants to be around him. Great, you know,
full of like vibrancy and chat and hand gestures around the table, but like is in the middle of the conversation while picking up the coffee and still having a sip, but still gesticulating with the other hand and stuff. I mean, that's what you need from somebody that you're going to have that hour and a half of around a dinner table with.
Let's talk Wimbledon.
Well, I just want to get onto. I don't like getting into transfer gossip or anything like that. It bores the life out of me at this point in the year. But I've seen a lot of Arsenal supporters moaning that the fact that like the main centre forward they're being linked with like right now is Victor Gyökeres, and even that's not really gone through, and it's holding midfielders, which is the thing that an Arsenal fan 10 years ago was screaming out for, right? And by the looks of it, Zubimendi is the one that is potentially going to be most likely to be coming into Arsenal at this point.
Done, I think.
But the lack of centre forward and a big push for a big centre forward, considering what we've said over the last 7 months about Arsenal and that being the missing piece, arguably. Is it surprising that you're not seeing any bigger names?
I think if I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm pretty happy, Ollie.
Yeah.
You've gone out there and you've signed Zubimendi, who I've watched him a little bit when I was covering La Liga, actually. He didn't blow me away, but I don't think he's the kind of player that does blow you away. He's just this possibly a little bit underrated player that will sit, pick the ball off the centre-backs and kind of tie everything together. And presumably, Ollie, the idea is that if he plays a little bit deeper, Declan Rice is given a bit more freedom to go and express himself and provide more goals and assists. So if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be excited about that one. Heavily linked to Liverpool last summer. Liverpool wanted to sign him. He didn't come in the end. Linked to Real Madrid. So obviously high pedigree. I'd be excited about that if I was an Arsenal fan. And then the Victor, how are we pronouncing his name?
Gyökeres.
Yeah. From Sporting. I mean, look, it's one of those, man, where according to if you look just purely at the statistics, scored 54 goals for Sporting last season, right? I mean, you can't do much more than score 54 goals in a season. He's 27 years of age. And is that going to translate to the Premier League? I don't know. Mikel Arteta doesn't know. Like, Arsenal fans don't know. You'll only find that out when you're 10 games into the Premier League season and he's got 7 goals and you think, yep, okay, we got a good one here. There's an element of a gamble whenever you sign a player like that. I think that score goals in a lesser league.
Knows English football as well. I mean,
Say again?
Knows English football. Played in the Championship and did very well in the Championship, Gyökeres.
Sure.
So it's the rough and tumble isn't going to affect him too much. So he's played at a star level in a top 6 league probably in Europe and knows the physicality and the nature of the Championship, which is way more physical than the Premier League. So
sure, but if you're Arteta, I mean, look, most clubs are going back to pre-season today, essentially. The pre-season for most clubs, apart from those competing in the Club World Cup, starts today. A couple of weeks of pre-season, then you get into the friendlies before the Premier League season starts in, 5 or 6 weeks. So I think if you're Arsenal, the two things you wanted, a defensive midfielder and a striker, you've got. And after that, it's just, do they fit in? And so we'll see. If I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm pretty excited. I still think Liverpool will be favourites for the Premier League title because I think when you go out and sign a Florian Wirtz plus the side you've already got. But this is Arteta now. Man, I mean, any kind of caveat that Arteta had for not winning silverware has probably gone now because you've gone out and you've spent over 50 million on Zubimendi, however much Gyökeres is going to be. What is it, 60, 70, something like that? I mean, you never know with the add-ons what it eventually ends up being. 68 million asking price I saw. Anyway, Arteta now, it's win a trophy. It's win a big trophy, man. That's it. It's win a big trophy this season because the board have backed him. And if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be excited, mate. Why not? I mean, it's a great squad. It is. Despite the fact that we mocked them, and there's a lot to mock about Arteta and Arsenal. They're a great squad, and they've gone out and bought 2 big players. So, yeah, I wouldn't be disappointed for Arsenal. Yeah. What could you reasonably have expected? You've signed a striker that got 54 goals last season. He's 27 years of age in his pomp.
Yeah, I mean, but it does. There's always that desire. You're playing in the biggest league in the world, arguably. You're playing in the most financially weighted league in the world, and you are the side with probably the most expectation to be able to compete with Liverpool, maybe aside from Manchester City next season. And Liverpool have gone out and spent big money on a big talent. Manchester City will go out and spend big money on a big talent. There's one glaring hole that if you fix would have maybe won you a Premier League title, at least one in the last 2 years, and you're still going for what feels like, in Premier League money, the cheap option of somebody not from a big league. When I think Arsenal fans would kind of hope that the big splash would be made on that sense. That's why I'd be expecting Arsenal fans to be a bit cheesed off if it's Victor Gyökeres is the big centre forward to save the season, basically.
I just don't know who else is out there. I mean, you're not getting Alexander Isak, so who else are you getting that can guarantee it? You have to take that kind of punt. I'm still flabbergasted no one's in for Osimhen, Ollie. We'll wait to see how that one... John Duran, by the way, he lasted back 6 months out in the UAE. I don't know whether you saw that. You might remember me slating him when he moved out there. And how he finds himself on loan to Fenerbahce, I believe.
Which is wasted.
Okay, I mean, yeah.
in English football, one thing we are quite good with is creative songs. And the number of Duran Duran songs you'd be able to do for him if he's back in English football. I mean, it just, foolish. He's missing a huge opportunity there. Massive one.
And it's also interesting how Turkey's positioned itself as this gateway from coming back from the UAE. So you're sort of UAE for 6 months. Oh, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. I'll just take a loan move at a Turkish club. Presumably there's some kind of subsidy of wages going on there. And then from there, you make your way back to a top 5 European league, I would suggest. Let's talk Wimbledon. Let's talk first about the electronic line calling system, because we went big on this last week. I said I hated the fact that the line judges have now gone. Everyone's had a week to watch Wimbledon and see how that looks aesthetically. And we did have a very interesting incident. We had a very interesting incident yesterday where essentially the electronic line calling system was turned off in error. I mean, we've all turned something off in error before, I guess, but to be turned off in error, I don't quite know how that happens, but it did, and it missed 3 calls in one game. And what's interesting here is that when tech comes in, it's always positioned as this watertight system. It's never actually the case because the tech is operated by humans, so there is still the margin for error. But what was interesting, Ollie, in this is that the chair umpire didn't clock it at first, because the minute you take away responsibility from humans, and we've seen this in football, the minute you start to bring in tech and say that, don't worry, tech's got your back. If you make a mistake or something's not right, the technology is there, like VAR in football. The umpire just lost a little bit of confidence and a little bit of value, and did call a couple of the decisions out when the system wasn't working, but took too long to realise that the system wasn't working because the umpire's been robbed of all responsibility. And this was noted in the post-match press conference when Pavlyuchenkova said that, we may as well get rid of the chair umpire. Now we've got rid of the line judges. We may as well get rid of the chair umpire, because what are they there for if they've also, by default, been stripped of responsibility? If you weren't listening last week, essentially I don't like the fact that the line judges have gone from Wimbledon. I think you lose more than you gain, and it's not a watertight system. And this was quite a big story, Ollie. But we are where we are. I mean, eventually the umpire will go, like I believe the referee in football will go. I think in football, eventually you have a man or a woman running around the pitch with a red button and a green button in their hand. They're told the decision, and they just press red or green for yes or no.
Yeah, it's interesting that in terms of how important is it to have a face and a human for players to get that frustrated expression out to? In that, there's a very famous clip that goes around the internet every so often from Major League Baseball, where like a poor call is made on a guy gets ejected from a baseball game, and the New York Mets coach comes out of the dugout and starts like getting in the face of one of the umpires. And this experienced MLB umpire, I don't know any of these names because I don't know Major League Baseball that well, but I've watched this clip a couple of times because it's great, because the ref is mic'd up. And the way he handles it, this official, is he like goes up to this old coach, and he's a proper like silver-haired old geezer, like couldn't look more cliche baseball, with like the nice kind of tubby baseball coach belly and all that kind of stuff, and he's getting so irate. This is ball, this is rubbish, goddamn, why are you doing this? How are you gonna screw us like this? And the umpire walks over, he's like, hey Bobby, hey, look at me, talk to me, and they're yelling at each other, but the umpire is there to ensure that he's a calm but loud voice and a face that this coach can get all of that aggression and frustration about the call that's been made by one of the other officials, another human at this point, but get all of that frustration and aggression about the call out of him, because there's nothing better as a human when you're stressed and frustrated about something and you have that kind of big old rant and you just get it off your chest at least, and you're like, oh, and it feels better to get it off your chest to another person as well. And this wrestler, hey, you talk to me. Hey, you know that we need to do this. You know they're going to be looking at us, Bobby. You know why we've had to make that call. All right, Bobby, are you okay?
A glimpse into Ollie Wilson's therapy sessions.
I mean, it's a phenomenal piece of man management from an official in a sporting arena like that. In the same way, the umpire in these situations now in tennis is mainly there so the tennis players can sit down and like have that bitch and moan about the other player bouncing the ball too many times. But it is a person that you're getting that stress off to, and it's a person of authority, which then when they say, look, this is why I'm not calling it. Or they say, all right, well, I'm going to do this. Because you're alerting this to me, I'm going to do this. It makes the athlete feel like, right, well, something has happened and I've got that off my chest and I can see that the position of authority is working and is maybe going to do something about it and keep an eye on this. If you end up with just it being a digitized official, Wimbledon, the US Open, the Australian Open, etc., I think that's really bad for the players because they don't have a person. If everything's called by AI, who are they going to yell at? What are they going to yell at when they're frustrated about decisions or other things that are happening? There's also those human moments that need to be addressed in all sports and those human interactions that need to be addressed across the world. I mean, how annoying is it when you're trying to dial, I don't know, your bank or somebody, and it's an automated telephone system, and you're like, I just want to speak to somebody because I know...
You actually have to say now, Ollie, I want to speak to a human when the AI comes. It's so annoying.
And it's so exhausting.
Yeah, it is.
But it's also so nice when stuff's going badly and, I don't know, somebody's messed up your flight booking and it's a person at EasyJet, for instance, that you finally get to. And you're like, look, I'm sorry because I'm not having a go at you right now, but this is unbelievably rubbish. And they go, I know, I get it. I don't like the way this company does their business anyway. And there's that bit of camaraderie that suddenly gets created between the pair of you down the phone of, we both hate this system and you don't want to be working for these corporate money munchers and I don't want to have to deal with these corporate money munchers. But we're two humans connecting over a telephone call right now.
Nailed
We're
it.
Both frustrated.
Absolutely. When you get Margaret from EasyJet and you say, look, Margaret, I know this is not your job, it's not your fault, but I just have to tell you you're blah, blah, blah,
I have
blah.
I have to tell another human who I feel like is kind of in charge here, or at least has the ability to run something, that I really hate this and I don't want to do this. That is what an official is there for as much as anything else in these situations. So I don't think you can afford to get rid of the official. It's a really interesting human experiment to make it a fully AI digitized, no human presence out there on the court, and what that would do to a lot of these tennis players who, let's face it, there's a lot of stress and anxiety over a 3.5 hour tennis match and a lot of iffy calls. I don't believe that the technology can always be perfect. I think there are times that we've seen on the clay courts where Hawkeye or whatever has called it in and you can see that there's no mark on the clay anywhere close to a line. And you have to take the human aspect over, surely, the digitized aspect at that point. It can't be done in terms of getting rid of the officials. And I don't think, as we mentioned last week, they should have ever got rid of a line judge. Ever.
Let's talk, there's two things I want to talk about with Wimbledon. One is, as is often the case with sports that aren't football, when there's a major sporting event, you get a lot of talk about how to improve it. And one thing that's very clear to me with Wimbledon, Ollie, and tennis in general at the major slams, one absolutely watertight, easy way to improve this sport is to ditch the warm-up. Because you're on centre court, you're there, you're watching on TV, or you're in centre court, and the players, they come out, and these are big names, you get the applause, and everyone's buzzing, the energy's there, building to this kind of crescendo when they walk out. And then you have the oddest few minutes where these two players who know each other's games back to front, who've warmed up, they're elite, highly tuned, finely tuned athletes, just pat the ball to each other for 3 minutes. It's completely and utterly pointless. You've warmed up before you've gone out. It wouldn't happen in another sport like this. It's just an absurd bit of theatre that is lagging behind in the sport. Get rid of the warm-up in tennis. It adds absolutely nothing. It takes loads away. As I say, like, the players are out. You've done the coin toss, and then you can start straight away. They've warmed up before. They've stretched. They're pro athletes. You don't need this very odd, and especially, Ollie, the deeper you go into a Grand Slam when you've got like an Alcaraz Djokovic, they know each other's games. Like they know each other's games. They're completely warmed up, and it's so strange to me that all the energy and enthusiasm and that moment gets sucked away in this very bizarre little tippy-tappy warm-up. So ditch the warm-up straight away.
I love it. I really like the warm-up. Honestly, this isn't me trying to be, all right, Dave's gone
You're
one way.
talking as a broadcaster here, aren't you?
No.
I
I think in general, as look, tennis goes on for long enough anyway. Adding a 10-minute little warm-up, I think, isn't the issue at all when it comes to like long tennis matches that feel exhausting. But I think it's great because the warm-up, and I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, but pre-kickoff, I don't like for the reason for there being a minute's silence, but like Remembrance Sunday football, when you have the teams come out, big roar, and then suddenly you have this quiet, and you have the 2 minutes on Remembrance Sunday, the bugle playing, everything is still. And then as soon as that finishes, you have the pop of like, let's go. And it brings you right back up again just before the game kicks off in a real short, sharp burst. Because all of that walking out normally at a football game, you know, they walk up, they line up, they shake hands, they have another little warm up, they do their thing while the team news comes up on the TV screen and all that kind of stuff. Like that takes time. And after the immediacy of seeing the teams come out, there's suddenly like this bit of a lull. I think the warm-up does that minute silence job of you watch them go left, right, having a forehand, backhand, a couple of serves, and then like they go and sit down, they have that pause, and you get that lull, that little quiet hum around centre court of, especially when you get to quarterfinals and semi-finals of Wimbledon, it's, oh yeah, okay, this is big, and it just brings everybody down in that sense of heightened anticipation for the first serve of the first game. Not only that, I think it's important for the athletes because they have warmed up indoors somewhere. But we're talking about open court tennis. If the roof's on, maybe not. No, because you need to know what wind conditions are maybe swirling around one of the outside courts, etc. When you throw that ball up for service, it might move a little bit left or right or come at you. You want to see just how the ball's moving in the air a little bit, just so you know, because the court may be more worn down than it was 2 days ago when you last played.
The conditions are the same for both players.
Yeah,
so
yeah, but you still need to be able to make minor adjustments for yourself.
The other rule change that I don't agree with, but I do see where people are coming from with this, is, as we know, the Grand Slams are best of 5 sets in the men's, right? There is a case to be made, potentially, Ollie, that in the first week of a Grand Slam, you actually just have it best of 3 sets, and then in the second week, you go to best of 5 sets. And the reasons for this are twofold. First of all, there's an awful lot in the first week of a slam of a Novak Djokovic and Alcaraz, whatever, just demolishing other players, right? And we don't need to see that as best of 5 sets because we can just see that in a best of 3 sets. There's a lot of that. We don't need that additional set. The second point is that there'd be more upsets. You know, if you condense something down to the best of 3 sets, there'd just be more upsets because it's more explosive. You could easily have a bad 45 minutes, hour and a half, and then all of a sudden you've lost the match. So there's a little bit more of that. And then maybe threefold, because thirdly, it's just an attention thing. Like the first week of a slam, you want to capture people, you want to get people in. And really the best of 5 sets, I mean, these can be 4 or 5 hours long. And while I think that's a beautiful thing in a final or a semi-final with 2 big players and you get incredible moments and unbelievable feats of endurance, I do take the point that in the first week of a slam, it will be more explosive and quicker just to have the men's as best of 3 sets. And then as soon as you get into that second week of the last 16, it becomes best of 5.
Do we want more upsets if we're going to have best of 5 anyway, though? Aren't we delaying the inevitable? Like, upsets are great, and Cinderella stories are great if somebody goes all the way through. But if you get through because you've put 2 sets together early in the first few rounds and knocked off somebody who's 50 ranking points higher than you in the first week of Wimbledon, that upset doesn't go down as oh, wow, what an unbelievable upset. It's over 5 sets. If he met in the semi-final, he'd do him. And there's then an inevitability to that upset ending anyway further down the line in the second week of Wimbledon when we go back to 5 sets. So if you're going to do it, take it all down to 3 or not at all. I understand it. We're all hooked on dopamine and instant freaking gratification, and that's why we have to have a T20 is too long for cricket fans. It needs to be 100 balls and all this kind of stuff. The test match isn't what it used to be. Kind of the same in tennis. I like the idea of the 5 sets filtering the wheat from the chaff. I like the idea of like somebody can get themselves in a hole. You can be two sets down and there's still time to pull yourself back. And that's actually what makes some of the great Wimbledon comebacks and some of the great stories that you'll have over the first few weeks, first few days of Wimbledon is, you know, somebody who maybe upsets the odds because they were 2 sets down to somebody 50 ranking points higher than them, and they come back and win 3 straight sets to book their name in the 3rd round of Wimbledon. That's suddenly a headline-grabbing story as opposed to, tennis player X won 2 sets to get through and that was all nice, and let's just just get this out, get this moving until we get to the good bit. That's what we're saying here if we're doing that. And I don't like it. If you're talking about traditions and getting upset about things like line judges being removed, etc., you can't have your cake and eat it too and suddenly start going, well, the tradition of 5 sets needs to be shortened, actually, because I need to just get all this riff-raff out of the way and get the big guys playing once again.
Finally, before we talk about F1, just on Wimbledon, is there anything better, Ollie, in the sporting world? Is there anything better than seeing a great athlete just about still at their peak? And I'm talking about Novak Djokovic here, who reached the last 16 with a wonderful performance over Kecmanovic. And this isn't just about tennis. This is just about sport in general and sporting figures. But like a sporting figure that's been amazing and epic and arguably the greatest ever in their discipline. Is there anything better than seeing them like just at the end of it? So it's hasn't reached the point where they can't possibly win and it's all got a little bit sad and when he's retiring. But equally, they're not the absolute standalone by themselves anymore. And this is the exact tiny window of time that Novak Djokovic finds himself in where he could still beat an Alcaraz or a Sinner in a one-off match, like no problem. He could win Wimbledon this year, but he's not favourite to do so. But it's still all there. And you're watching he's 38 years of age, man. Like, and he's still moving with that fluidity, with that flexibility. And it's just amazing to watch. And I think across sport, that it is such a tiny moment when like a Messi or Ronaldo goes from being like the greatest to, oh, it's over. And there's like this, maybe you get like a 12 or 18 months. And I'm thinking maybe about Messi at the World Cup in Qatar, right? Like that was when that wasn't actually the greatest iteration of Messi ever, because we saw that a few years earlier at Barcelona. But equally, it's not this version of Messi, which is like the MLS version of Messi, which, yeah, I know he's still scoring goals and stuff, but it's not Messi really at his pomp. So there's this tiny like last hurrah of genius that is so fun to watch because you know it's just about to go. Maybe with Tiger as well when he won his last major, right?
Well, Tiger in the 2019 Masters, back from injury, like almost lost his leg, of course, after that car crash and struggling to still get round a golf course some days. And, you know, you think, Tiger's time is done. We've missed the end of Tiger. And he has that unbelievable Sunday and comes back and wins. And like the most unexpected. It's amazing. It's like Brady winning with the Buccaneers, and you're like, well, he's still not quite got the arm, but he's not at that point that he can't throw a deep ball still. And genuinely 5 months later was a completely different Tom Brady in that second season with the Bucs and couldn't deliver the ball and do what he was so used to be able to doing. And I think you're right, that window of he's too old, but it's still there. If it was an action movie scene, it would be like where like the old main character, like he's been beaten down into the dirt, but he gets up to just deliver one last knockout blow to, I don't know, the main bad guy or something. I mean, it's like that
the
moment.
Rock in Baywatch. You ever seen that film? He's sort of an older fella, but yeah.
I mean, it's just that's the kind of moment that you're looking at with some of these greats, and it's awesome to see a bit of the old Djokovic spark come back. And you know what else is that an athlete at that age who's very much, you see it a lot in the kind of post 30, 35 years old athlete. They're so much more mature about the way they carry themselves in a lot of different ways. I want to think of like Fernando Alonso, he's an athlete now who's still kind of on the wane, but over the last few years, there's just been some glimmers in that Aston Martin that he can tussle it out with the best. He can still actually make a big impression on Formula One races, etc. But they have that kind of air of looking back and going, hey, like, the sport is great, but it's not everything now. But you know that in those moments, they're getting a little bit back of that youthfulness and that fire from when they were 24, 25. And I think that's as exciting as anything else, because you know inside that 35, 38-year-old man with Djokovic right now, there's a bit of him that's going, we still got it. We still got it, baby. Let's keep riding this wave and see how far we can go. And that excites me as much as anything else, is seeing somebody who's still got a little bit of fire left in them, just putting it all out there on a big stage like Wimbledon. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, Ollie, you said about the maturity that comes with being in the twilight years of your career, especially a very successful career, because there's a lot of talk about tennis players and depression actually recently. I mean, Zverev was talking about how there's no joy in his life. You're talking about whatever he is, was seeded 4 or 5, 3 or 4 for this tournament. millions in the bank, athlete, perfect health, and he was saying there's no joy in his life. When you hear someone say that, it's kind of like, whoa, man, that's crazy. A guy in his 20s. And obviously Naomi Osaka's, spoken about her struggles with mental health. And there's a lot of this in tennis. I think largely because it's quite a nomadic solo sport. Yes, you got your support teams, but there's a lot of hotels by yourself in far-flung corners of the world, which might look glamorous from the outside, but it's actually not when you're jet lagged and it's 3 a.m. and you're watching telly in the hotel room where you don't know anyone. So I think there's a lot of that. But Novak Djokovic was asked about this and he said, why is it that so many players now are more kind of depressed than they used to be? And he basically blamed social media. He said, look, there's numerous factors to this, but he said that tennis players are just on their phones all day, as they're more guilty than the average member of the public because you can't train for 8 hours as a tennis player, right? Same for any elite athlete. It's very short, sharp. You have a 45-minute intense training session. Maybe you'll do some cardio. Like he said, people are on their phones an absurd amount in the locker room, in the dressing room, just before they go on to play a match, just afterwards. And obviously, because Novak grew up in an era where he didn't have a phone, so he's probably a bit more calibrated to living without it, maybe. Plus, with age, hopefully comes a bit of experience. So yeah, it was interesting to hear him say that and just talk openly about the dangers that everyone can feel with that.
Andy Murray mentioned it as well, that he'd been in locker rooms pre-match and his opponents just sat there on the phone and he's like, what? Why?
Bonkers.
He used to maybe sometimes have a chat with his opponent or something like that, depending on what the formalities were with them normally and everything, but to just be sat there on your phone. And we talk about it, football managers having trouble getting players off their phones in the dressing room pre-match and stuff like that, and they're like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a mobile phone anywhere near the locker room. I want you to be focused on this. The other thing with tennis, which is a bit different as well, is that probably on an individual sporting basis, you can look at some other stuff like triathlon and golf as kind of similar in that nature. It's you against the rest of the field. But the difference is that there's more camaraderie in those sports, because I think in triathlon you're still tackling the course. Every course is different. Everybody has slightly different strengths and weaknesses, whether it's the run, whether it's the bike. And it's a Herculean effort. When two tennis players are completely gassed, say they end up going for 5-set tiebreaker and 31-29 it finishes or something like that, and those rare occasions it goes on for seemingly forever, and they're gassed, and there's that embrace at the end of it of just what an unbelievable match. Or even at the end of a rally and they have to change ends and there's a kind of acknowledgement of wow, we're both putting it all out on the line. But that's quite few and far between in tennis, whereas in triathlon that's pretty much every single week. They're putting their bodies through insane amounts of intensity to be able to finish in the times that they do. And in golf, you're playing against the course as much as you're playing against the other people. You can get hard done by. There's more elements of luck, whereas tennis is such a more isolated bubble than so many other sports, because the court is the court. It's the same size, it's the same length everywhere you go. It's just the surface that changes slightly. So you're not playing against the court. It is purely against the opposite number, and if you're not winning, you're losing in tennis. There's no ifs and buts about it. You can either be at Wimbledon for 24 hours or 2 weeks. There's a bit of in-between time as well in that, but once you're out, you're out. There's no second chance unless you're maybe in a doubles competition.
F1. I listened to this on the radio. Ollie did the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. I was working, so I had it on the radio. Let me tell you what I liked and what I didn't like. Then I watched the highlights afterwards. What I liked is in the highlights, the way it's all put together with the graphics and the on the left-hand side. This doesn't work very well on a podcast, but if you watch the video highlights of a Grand Prix, I love the table of where people are. I think it's really smart. I love the interjection of the radio talk back between the drivers and their team. Who was it, Ollie, early on? Gets knocked out of the race and says, who the hell was that? On the radio, and that comes across, and it's oh, cool, that's a fun moment.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to like. Mate, it's too confusing. From the outsider as a non-purist, honestly, I listened to the whole thing on the radio, and I didn't understand at times what was going on, and I appreciate that radio commentary isn't necessarily designed for me, right? You have to cater to the hardcore F1 fans that are going to listen and understand every nuance, but I would have appreciated every 10 minutes someone just playing to the non-F1 fan out there, because the commentary was confusing. I didn't know what was going on half the time. I would have loved just a constant understanding of who was actually winning, which I don't think I got sometimes. It's when you do a football commentary, you can essentially never say enough times 0-0, 34 minutes played. You can never say that enough times. Honestly, you can say that every 2 minutes and it still sounds okay because people are tuning in and out at all different times. And even if you're listening, I think a radio commentary, every couple of minutes, it has to be like, you have to say the score and the time. It's a 2-second job, but it just is a great little binder between every sentence. And yeah, I found it quite confusing. But talk to us about the British Grand Prix, and you said it was a cracker.
Well, I want to talk to you about the radio commentary, because I used to love the guy who does Sky Sports now, David Croft, used to do 5 Live's Formula One commentary. And when I was going to games at the ground every single weekend, I used to listen to 5 Live's, particularly qualifying on a Saturday a lot of the time. And Crofty was fantastic at it, of keeping you up to date with what was going on, because he wasn't just telling you what was on the screen of the TV that he's watching to do the commentary. He was also, there's other monitors that tell you all the other data and plus points and stuff like that. And actually, we were talking about this week with the triathlon coverage, and I mentioned in Formula One, they do this on the TV broadcast. Brundle and Crofty will continually explain things that the regular F1 fan will already know. So they go behind the safety car, after a crash. Safety car takes them round at a certain speed limit, and then when the safety car comes in, and this was a big incident in the end this weekend, and I was interested to actually ask you about how this came across on the radio broadcast, of once the safety car goes in, there is a line basically near the start-finish line where racing can resume, in terms of you can start overtaking again. But until they get to that point, the safety car goes into the pits, and the first car in the race, because they're all queuing up behind each other basically, becomes the new safety car. So his pace dictates how fast everybody goes, which means if you're in the lead, you can trundle, and suddenly go, and then suddenly accelerate, and that might give you an extra just couple of seconds to pull away from everybody else. You're the one that's in charge. And every time that happens in a Formula One race, which is reasonably often, it will happen at least 15 times a season, I reckon, a safety car. Maybe even more than that, because you'll get more than one in a race. And it's explained that when the safety car comes in, Piastri will hold them and wait until he wants to go, and nobody can overtake until they get to that line. And they do that on the television broadcast all the time. And they'll explain roughly where the line is. It's in a different position on every Formula One track. And I always think, I already know this, but I'm always like, but it doesn't irritate me. They don't dumb it down and pander. They just say what the scenario is. Whereas I think in a lot of other sports, I've noticed it a lot in American football, they can kind of be like a real dumbing down of it, and to let me explain this with kid gloves on, like you're talking to a 4-year-old basically. And they don't do that. They just explain the situation clearly. And when I was watching back the race this weekend, I was thinking, that is such a difficult one to try and explain. Particularly then what happened with Oscar Piastri, because Piastri, if you missed it on the weekend, they're all lined up behind the safety car, going around after this incident. The safety car goes in, and Piastri basically slams on his brakes, and Max Verstappen who's in second place, goes in front of Piastri, and then has to wait for Piastri to go past him again. They're not even racing at this point, so Verstappen's technically illegally overtaken Piastri, but Piastri's been... Basically, there's an F1 rule of you can't play silly beggars when you're in that situation. It's not quite detailed in that way in the rules and regulations, but you can't just slam on your brakes and like really abruptly and make everybody concertina, because it's a safety risk more than anything else. So Piastri ends up with a 10-second penalty that costs him the Grand Prix win this weekend and allows Lando Norris to win his first ever British Grand Prix. And it's a silly mistake, but it's a really difficult one to explain all of that just as the race is about to restart. And because they're all together, there's a lot of overtaking and possibility of overtaking as soon as they get going up to full speed again, as soon as Piastri starts racing off. So you're trying to explain a very niche moment in a very short amount of time, while there's suddenly going to be a lot of other things going on as well that will have a huge impact on the race, and there's a chance again for another incident, another crash, cars tripping over each other, etc. And it's a really difficult job. I really sympathise. But that's, to David Croft's credit, back in the day on 5 Live in particular, that was what made him so great, because he had that ability to be able to bring all of that information to you. I mean, that's taken me a long time to explain just then. We're 2 laps down after that. So it's a really tough sport to get right on the radio, and a really good commentator is able to do it. But And I'm not saying Five Live was or wasn't or anything like that. I'm just saying it's probably one of the more difficult ones to do for radio.
And also, you don't know what they've been told by their producers, Ollie, right? Whether to cater to the fair weather fan or are you just talking to the diehards. So there's an element of that as well. But I was thinking Well,
in sports broadcasting, so Sky do it with Formula One. The NFL, every time they go to overtime on television, even the most ardent NFL fan gets the overtime rules explained to them or gets different rules, when there's a penalty. That's still explained clearly. Again, not pandering, but, so that the average Joe can sit and watch it and just start to pick it up. Football doesn't do it too often. They'll say, we'll have an extra 30 minutes after this if we need it. But it's not...
No, but it does. Ollie, you will get a lot of 1-1 on the night, 2-2 on aggregate. As it stands, Real Madrid are going through or something or whatever. So I do think that does get put in. And that doesn't bother me if I know that... Well, this is back with the away goals. But you know what I mean? Real Madrid lead 3-2 on aggregate. As it stands, Real Madrid are going through. I don't mind that additional thing just for your fair weather fan.
Yeah, I know. I think it's and it's an important thing to remember, not only as a fan, but when you're broadcasting as well. Like we this weekend had a few things. We're doing 4 races in Hungary on this triathlon, and there's a few times that you're kind of watching the same piece of footage again. You're going over the course map again, something like that. And it's like, well, one person, there might be somebody that tunes in only for that race. They might not watch all 4 races. So you can't see it as this race is part of a big broadcast. It's each individual race is its own thing. And if it requires just reiterating, re-mentioning any of the rules and regulations to make sure everybody is in the same place, it's better to have everybody in a average knowledge place than taking people down rabbit holes that they completely don't understand when it comes to the complexities of going through transition or something like that. And it's a really interesting thing to see how often different sports do that sort of thing and how good broadcasters will make sure, in the same way on a radio football game, saying the time, the scoreline and where the ball is. You can't do that enough. Like all the stats and transfer gossip and all that can just go out the window. Just say where the ball is, what the score is, and how long's left.
What about the race itself then, Ollie? Lando Norris.
Unfreaking believably good. I mean, drama from the word go when you've got a damp track, half the grid, everybody on the grid's on intermediates, a few then, you have a formation lap. You'd hate it, Dave. It's like a tennis warm-up. It's disgusting. Where they go around the track slowly, getting some heat into their tyres, vitally important, and just kind of checking everything's all good before then they line up on the grid again and it's lights out and you go. And at the end of the formation lap, handful of cars, Charles Leclerc, the big Ferrari driver, I think George Russell did as well, suddenly pull into the pits and change their tyres for dry weather tyres as opposed to the intermediates. They've got grooves in to clear the water away and give them more grip on a damp track. So they suddenly start risking it for a biscuit. So immediately you're like, oh shit, if this works off for Leclerc, he could be 5-6 seconds faster than everybody else on the first lap and just go bombing through. That created plenty of excitement. Then you've got the incident with Max Verstappen and Piastri behind the safety car because the gamble didn't pay off. The track was wet enough that you needed to be on intermittence, but you've still got that. When do you change to dry weather tyres? A lot of guys risked it for a biscuit midway through the race and kind of put dries on too early, which is why you had a lot of guys kind of running wide. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc ran wide at the same corner on the same lap, almost alongside each other in the Ferraris. You had Max Verstappen spinning for no real reason, just struggling with the damp conditions. Another slow section when Lando Norris was breathing down his neck. And you have the incident with Piastri that costs him a 10-second penalty. And Lando Norris goes on to win his first ever British Grand Prix. I mean, it's one of those races that a recap from me right now would take too long. We'd get too long-winded. And it's just better to go on the 10-minute YouTube highlights from Formula One or from Sky Sports and go and watch that. But the big thing, and this is so great in sport when it's the other story. Norris winning his first Grand Prix, British Grand Prix, is a big story. And he's in tears over the radio at the end. But it immediately gets eclipsed because Nico Hülkenberg, who's racing for basically back end of the grid car, 239 Formula One races.
And that was his first podium.
First ever podium this weekend. Yeah, gets the third position on the podium behind the two McLarens. Absolutely just great. Really nice. I mean, considered a really good, solid driver. Has always been kind of middle of the order in decent teams, probably in the worst kind of position he's ever been in his Formula One career, but because of all the carnage of what was going on around in the Grand Prix, Hülkenberg, just as an experienced elder statesman, just keeping everything steady, making the right decisions, and finally has his moment. And this is the equivalent of like a Novak Djokovic, but a Novak Djokovic who's never got close to like a Wimbledon semi-final before, and at 38 years old, he suddenly gets into the Final Four or graces the... You seen the tennis movie Wimbledon with Kirsten Dunst? And like the...
Have I seen it? Mate,
of course you've seen it.
It's a go-to on a plane every time. Like, it's a classic.
It's a tearjerker on a
Britain
plane.
of old. It's 90s Britain. And they drive down to his little pad in Brighton overlooking the seafront, and he plays on his old tennis court. Oh, what a film.
And he's at the end, and he's like the British guy that's been there but never really been there. And he gets his chance finally at the end to go out on the Wimbledon centre court stage. And that's as great as the love interest, I think, in it for me. Like, this is a guy who's finally getting to live his middle-class lifestyle dream of popping corks around Wimbledon. I mean, this is the real-life equivalent of that at what is the home of motor racing. I mean, I said last week, you said, which Grand Prix should I watch? And I said, you should definitely watch Silverstone. And I'm glad I made that recommendation. It's been the best race of the year by a mile. It's such a great track, great atmosphere. And yeah, near perfect weekend for almost everybody across the board, except for Max Verstappen and probably the Ferraris.
All right, nudge me again in 6 months for the next F1 race, Ollie. Before we finish, just because this is breaking news, Ricky Hatton, 46, announces comeback from boxing, ending 13-year retirement. I mean, should there be a law in boxing? You know how you're not allowed to be a pilot over the age of 65 or whatever? There's certain professions, or I'm pretty sure surgeons must have a cutoff, or like certain professions have a cutoff. And do you think that boxing and the boxing federations, I mean, do you think that there should be a hard cutoff at 45 or something like that? Because Ricky Hatton, turns 47 in October, and he's going to fight on the 2nd of December in Dubai. I mean, what are we doing here?
Ching. I mean, we're just cashing in.
Yeah, but
it's just cashing in. Like, if Ricky Hatton needs to do this for financial reasons, I don't know the ins and outs. Or if he just wants to do it.
How can you spend that much money?
Mate,
like, what are you possibly spending your money on?
It's so easy for these guys to do it as well, or they get bad advice, or they get manipulated by people that are supposedly looking out for their investments and stuff. It's so easy. I mean, I know a chap who he runs an organisation called LAFA. And not to give him too much of a boost on a huge podcast like NASP, but anybody who's going to be inundated, anybody who's running another brand with a great acronym like LAFA is up in my book the same as NASP. But he's got a business where he realised that players coming from South America, Spanish-speaking players, Portuguese-speaking players coming to the UK, to Premier League sides in particular, but also across the leagues, were getting absolutely robbed. Because somebody turns up at the house, say a guy comes to do some building work on the house or do some plumbing or whatever, and realizes it's bloody hell, it's the Bruno Fernandes, unbelievable. That price is going up, 40, 50%, because I know he can afford it. He doesn't know any better what needs to be paid. He's only just come into the country. He's only just signed for Man United. I'm going to, take liberties with it. And he set up a company which basically provides advice, information and support to footballers getting themselves set up in the UK in terms of, here are tradies that we trust. Here are people. We will have somebody to make sure that you're not getting an extra 50% put on your bill, 25% put on your bill, etc. by people that are trying to take you for every little extra penny that they can get, which... Some people will say, "Oh, my heart bleeds for the guy on 120,000 a week if he's getting that, and somebody's getting."
No, but no one wants to feel like they've been screwed.
But yeah, getting manipulated and screwed over by in any walk of life it's not fun at all. And I think it's a great idea to have, and it just highlights how easy it is for people to just take those little extra bits of money off sports stars. In almost every place that they go, Ricky Hatton's buying a pint. It's actually £5.50, mate. Yeah, we put the bar prices up the other week or something. I mean, it just probably easily happens, and he'll pay it because he's used to just putting the money down and keep paying it until. And I'm not suggesting he is in financial trouble. That's the only main reason I can think for the want of a 47-year-old man to go back in the ring is to cash in, because you're looking at Jake Paul is now a legitimate 15th best boxer in the world at his weight level. He's been given that ranking and gives him a chance now to call out some of the biggest fighters in the world for perhaps world title fights in the next year or two. You're looking at Mike Tyson stepping back into the ring and making millions off a Netflix bout that was, let's face it, a joke of an evening, barely was boxing. So if Ricky Hatton's thinking I can go out to Dubai and fight a fighter from maybe the UAE or something like that and go and make a load of money to go across there and get another big payday that secures my lifestyle for the next 40 years or something, yeah, perfect. Why not? I'm going to go and do that. There's a lot of money flying around boxing, and there are a lot of fights that aren't very good.
Do you